Let's talk about some shadowy and sneaky Space Marines and power armor then, with a discussion of the Vanguard in Warhammer 40k and how to get an army of the Sons of Corax off the ground. Hello and welcome back to Warspec Tactics, where today we're talking Space Marines and Vanguard in particular, with an overview of collecting the chapter in 10th edition Warhammer 40k and putting these ebony clad Space Marines on the tabletop in an army. In the video we'll talk about why you might want to collect an army of Vanguard in particular, some thoughts about planning a force, some ideas for first purchases and a look at Kayvaan Shrike in particular, and then a few ideas for expanding an army, and talk about the Vanguard Spearhead and one example army list. Loads to talk about, so let's jump straight into it. First up, why might you want to collect an army of Vanguard Space Marines in particular? In the lore and background, the Vanguard are the 19th Legion of Space Marines, the descendants of their shadowy primarch Codex Corax, last seen battling Lorgar, his essence unravelling slightly in the Eye of Terror, becoming a creature of pure shadow. They hail from their homeworld of Deliverance and have Kayvaan Shrike as their chapter master, fighting with their iconic jump pack and lightning claws. In contrast with the vast majority of their battle brothers, the Vanguard favour pragmatism, stealth, and patiently holding the killing blow until the opportune moment, combining the raw might and shock assault of the Astartes with some very nuanced tactics, and often able to deliver victory against foes many times their number due to their surgical strikes. When they take to the battlefield, they often make use of lighter Phobos armour and plenty of scouts, eliminators attempting to pick off enemy commanders, and the killing blow is often dealt at the hands of their jump pack elites. They're particularly well known for their dual lightning claw Vanguard veterans striking at the heart of the enemy. Miniatures wise, the Vanguard are pretty well supplied with the enormous Space Marine range, bigger than the vast majority of factions in Warhammer 40k. I feel like Games Workshop's big development of the Phobos range of miniatures really plays into their hands there. It does feel like those miniatures are more themed to Vanguard than just about any of the other chapters. They do have some unique choices here. They've got Kayvaan Shrike, their chapter master, fighting from his Phobos armor and techie jump pack, and having a nice hairstyle to go with their dark and brooding nature. For the Primaris Space Marines, they also have this upgrade sprue that you can see on the right, and modelled on the Space Marine on the left, some Raven Feather and Skull tokens, sculpted jump packs with their chapter iconography, a scoped bolt rifle, and a few Vanguard themed heads. They are particularly well known for their Corvus armor, the Mark 6 one that seems to have been front and centre at the latest Horus Heresy reboot. Speaking of which, if you did want to look there for a little bit more flavour, there's a few Horus Heresy unique units to the Vanguard. I do quite like the look of their clawed veterans on the left here, all very sinister and nice stylised jump packs, and they also have a practical looking squad of elite snipers. In game, their current rules are found in Codex Space Marines, where you'll find all the generic rules for the Codex Space Marine datasheets, plus Kayvaan Shrike and their kind of themed attachment in the Vanguard Spearhead, giving them a whole load of tricks and things that exemplify their playstyle in the lore. If you fielded a fairly archetypical Vanguard army, you'd probably get an army that's slightly more ranged than melee and employing a good number of Phobos units and jump pack units, using shenanigans to get close to the enemy and deal damage from unexpected quarters, and maybe not taking quite as many heavy tanks or vehicles compared with some chapters. Realistically though, there's nothing to stop you using any of the other detachments within Codex Space Marines. Any chapter can run with anything these days, so you could certainly field them with say the Gladius Force or the Firestorm Force or things if you wanted. For in-game power, I'd say that both Kayvaan Shrike is a good datasheet and the Vanguard Spearhead is a good detachment, though at the moment you'll probably not find as many Vanguard lists topping tournaments or anything like that. Due to the way that the chapter rules work, they are at a bit of a disadvantage, only having the one unique character datasheet to draw you to play them, when they could be competing against things like say Black Templars with their very strong datasheets, or the many cast of characters that Ultramarines could bring to the table. Kayvaan Shrike definitely is pretty strong in himself though. In any case, if you want an army of dour and practical Space Marines using sneaky tactics to pick the foe apart practically before delivering a killing blow, the Vanguard might well be for you. If you did choose to collect yourself a force of Vanguard, to start out you could maybe plan a rough 1000 point or 2000 point army list to get a grasp of what you might be building towards. I'd likely be tempted to use Battlescribe, New Recruit, or maybe the Warhammer app if you have the subscription and Codex. It can make you think about what you're actually going to want to put on the tabletop if you go through and actually have to make some choices. It might be worth thinking what sort of force you want to wind up with when you're expanding your collection. If you want to very religiously stick to their fluffy choices, then in general the Raven Guard tend to prefer infantry a bit more so than armour. Might have quite a lot of Phobos Space Marines in their ranks, things like infiltrators, incursors, or reavers. They definitely make good use of scouts and eliminators to snipe down enemy HQs, and as mentioned, they're particularly well known for their Vanguard veterans with lightning claws, though just about anything else that moves fast and hits hard would generally be quite nice. Things like storm speeders and jump intercessors also feel quite appropriate. I like the aim to pick up at least some of those units, but then have a bit of a balance between that and all the other good Space Marine data sheets out there. They are a Codex chapter that can be called upon to fight in any discipline of war, so you can certainly add plenty of battle line intercessors, big fighty terminators, and tanks to support. Otherwise, you'll collect towards units that might be useful in Vanguard Spearhead. Weirdly, the infiltration shenanigan tricks can work quite well with things like aggressors or centurions there, which Raven Guard seem to have been quite good with over the past couple of editions. Or you can just make yourself quite a balanced Space Marine list and maybe focus on gameplay a little bit more. Make sure you've got some units to hold down objectives, some primary damage dealers that are going to be able to deal with the enemy's big threats, and then a bunch of mission units like those Phobos things and scouts, or maybe some jump packs to move around doing secondary objectives and do screening and nuisance charges. Otherwise, with planning an army, you could think about painting up a test model. I'd probably be tempted by something like a standard intercessor or assault intercessor, though maybe a Phobos infiltrator or something could be equally appropriate, if not more so. Given that they're a solid chapter with established colour schemes and plenty of fans out there, you'll find lots of good painting guides if you give it a search here on YouTube. Games Workshop have made quite a few, as you can see here. Plenty of other creators have made theirs. They may be just in particularly focusing on how you want to realise their black colour scheme might be the most important thing. There's a fair few ways in which you could try and paint black. It's probably best to fix on one in which you're going to be happy and not go insane with the process of it, and you also like the end result of. For things like chapter iconography and details and things, you could potentially just use transfers to put the iconography on the shoulder pads. You could dig into those upgrade sprues, though they will cost you a bit. And I would bear in mind that there's plenty of people out there doing 3D printed things for upgrading Warhammer miniatures these days. Most of the Space Marine chapters do have some people making things for them. That could be another way to get some iconography that could be fitting with the Raven Guard. Moving on to the exciting bit though, let's talk miniature purchases. And while I've already talked about a fair few of the more iconic choices for the Raven Guard, just to start out, it probably makes sense to try and get a core of an army together before focusing on adding the miniatures that you specifically like and want to tailor to the theme. To start with, for a core of the Force though, I'd probably be most tempted to start with one of the Space Marine discount boxes, of which there are many. There's the starter set, the Leviathan box set, the Vanguard Task Force, or one of the Combat Patrols. Or if you don't want to go for quite a big investment box set so far, it's probably best to go for one of the basic troops choices. Maybe some standard intercessors with bolt rifles, or maybe some infiltrators, seeing as it's Raven Guard and we like sneaky things. Starting off with some more standard Space Marine options, there's the Vanguard Task Force, which is a direct only deal from Games Workshop. This one's basically the old start collecting box, a Phobos Lieutenant, 10 infiltrators, 3 eliminators, and 3 suppressors. A fairly good on theme box for the Raven Guard, given they're all about infiltration and things like that. And this one's £85, $140, or €110. The biggest downsides for this one are their monopose miniatures, so you don't get, say, the las fusils for the eliminators if you wanted them. And also, as it's a direct Games Workshop web store only box set, it means that you can't get any discounts from third parties, say like buying through friendly local gaming stores. Still though, I'd say it's a pretty reasonable way to get quite a lot of Phobos armour on the table. Otherwise, one of the more obvious logical start points is Combat Patrol Space Marines, though if you're going to get that, it makes more sense to get that via the actual 40k starter set. This one's £65, €85, or $110, and comes with 5 Terminators, 5 Infernus Marines, and a Terminator Captain, and you can buy the Librarian separately if you want to make it up to the full Combat Patrol. This one also comes with really quite a lot of Tyranids as well that you might be able to split the box with someone, or trade or resell, or you could just paint them up as painting projects. If you want the Combat Patrol for Space Marines though, then this is currently the way to do it. This plus a Librarian and Terminator armor is directly cheaper than the standard Space Marine Combat Patrol that comes with the same models, and you get all the Tyranids for free as well. Otherwise, before we take a look at Combat Patrols, it's probably worth bearing in mind a couple of past box sets. These ones not available from Games Workshop's web store live anymore, but you might see occasional copies of the Raven Strike Battle Force around. This one was one with Kayvaan Shrike in it, a set of the Raven Guard upgrades, 10 Reavers, the spooky scary Space Marines with the grav chutes and skull masks, the Eliminator Snipers once again, though the full multi-part kit, 2 Invicta tactical warsuits, Stealth Scout Walkers that you might expect to do some heavy lifting for the Raven Guard, and also the Phobos Librarian, who's quite a fun model, I think. This one was a discount deal for the previous Christmas at time of recording. If you can manage to find one of these at some semblance of its original price, could be interesting enough. Otherwise for past box sets though, given that it's 10th edition, the Leviathan box set is particularly standout. If you could split the box set 50-50 with a Tyrannid player, then it's the single best money per models deal that you can get in 10th edition 40k so far. Terminated and Furnace Marines, Stern Guard, the Ballistas Dreadnought and a cast of characters, just generally quite a good way to get lots of Space Marine plastic on the table. You might find some of these at individual Warhammer stores or a few third parties. For example, Element Games in the UK still has some of them left, linked in the video description. For newer players who are looking to pick up Warhammer miniatures, I would bear in mind the different ways in which you can do so besides Games Workshop's web store directly. Direct from the Warhammer store is often the most reliable, but often the most expensive as well. There are a few potential ways to save money in getting together a collection. Perhaps the most simple value saving are local gaming stores around the world, often giving somewhere between a 10 and 20% discount compared with Games Workshop directly. I have a few of them linked below. Element Games in the UK has like 15% off, Gap Games in Australia 21%, Fenris Workshop in Canada 10% plus a loyalty program, and Wargame Portal in the USA has 15%, can all just be a good way to save a little bit compared with Games Workshop directly. If you buy anything after clicking the links to those guys down in the video description, a small amount goes to help support Allspecs Tactics without costing you any more. Beyond local gaming stores though, you might want to look at the second-hand market. Say eBay and a few other stores do have second-hand programs as well. Quality can definitely be variable depending on how nicely people have treated their miniatures, but Space Marines are pretty much the most popular faction, so you usually get a fair turnover of kits that you might want. In this day and age, just also bear in mind that 3D printing and third-party manufacturers could be another good source. 3D printing can be a bit of a hobby in its own right, but also could be one potential source of alternative sculpts, aesthetic upgrades and things like head swaps, shoulder pads and weapon options. Can just be one thing to consider and have a look for what's out there. Getting back to discount bundle options though, there are the Space Marine Combat Patrols as well. The Space Wolves one seems kind of Phobos heavy for Raven Guard purposes. It gets you Intercessors, an Invicta Warsuit, plus some Reavers. Perhaps the only slight turn off if you're not actually collecting Space Wolves itself is the Wolfguard Battle Leader, who is a bit Space Wolf themed. You might need to do a little bit of conversion for him to get him to be a bit more appropriate for other chapters. Otherwise, the potentially soon to be replaced Dark Angels Combat Patrol box set is a fairly good one. This one has Inceptors, a Redemptor Dreadnought, a Chaplain and some Intercessors, just generally quite nice a unit mix for most Space Marine chapters, hard to go too far wrong there I think. And kind of similarly for the Blood Angels one, I quite like the unit mix for this one as well. It gets you some Intercessors, some Infiltrators that you could also build adding Cursors, a few Aggressors, an Impulsor as the standard transport for the Primaris, plus a regular Librarian. As you can tell, Space Marines do have really quite a lot of different options for getting into them in terms of big discount box sets. It really just depends on the unit mix or exactly what sort of Raven Guard army you want. And you certainly could build up the army through multiple of these, maybe get one copy of the Vanguard Task Force, mix it with one Space Marine, half of Indomitus if you can find it, and then maybe add one of the Combat Patrols to that if you want one of those. Next up, let's focus on Kayvaan Shrike though, as the Raven Guard's unique Primaris character. He's the chapter master of the Raven Guard, previously the shadow captain of the 3rd Company, and he fights with the brutal Raven's talons rumoured to be crafted by Corvus Corax himself, frighteningly powerful lightning claws that are capable of tearing near any foe asunder. I think he's quite a nice special character to add a lot of theme to a force. In game, his datasheet I think is quite an interesting one. It's 100 points for a 5-wound captain/chapter master style profile. He moves 12 inches with fly with his jump pack and can attach to either the assault intercessors with jump packs or the Vanguard veteran squad with jump packs. At range he fires with his blackout pistol, a couple of heavy bolter style shots at 18 inches with precision, and in melee those Raven's talons are pretty nasty in general purpose, 7 attacks at strength 5, AP -2 and damage 2 with twin linked, so should stack a fair amount of wounds on the enemy. And they do have the precision keyword as well, so he could threaten to destroy an enemy leader from the heart of their squad. He could be potentially run as a lone operative if you just wanted to field him going it solo, though I feel like the more interesting use of him is to have him lead a unit, and then he provides that same sort of lone operative protection to them. You can't shoot them outside of 12 inches, meaning that you're pretty much guaranteed that your squad gets close and gets to do something before the opponent gets to react. It's kind of unusual to have permanent lone operative style protection on a unit quite as dangerous as a full squad of assault intercessors or Vanguard veterans. And he also has a fun ability to jump on and off the board with his Echo of the Ravens by a special rule. If the squad is massively out of position, you could return to reserves and then deep strike down somewhere else, maybe threatening a charge from there. I feel like that rule is maybe a little bit less important than the Shadow Master one though. I feel like with his 12-inch movement plus his lone operative protection, there's a good chance he can get to where he wants to on the board anyway. In any case though, I think his rules are pretty interesting. I feel like he does a good job for his 100 points. Good melee damage and pretty guaranteed to get the jump on at least one enemy unit, unless the enemy has something to close the gap very quickly and hit you first. Between starter box sets, probably Kayvaan Shrike and a few iconic units that you like the look of. I generally aim to have the core of a Space Marine force that is fairly combat ready, and then go on to expand from there in small chunks, building towards a rough 2000 point army list that you might have in your mind, but playing games as you go and adapting as you learn. In 40k, there's always the scope for just collect what you like the look of as a generally good principle. Optimal rules change around really quite quickly in 40k, and Space Marines can be a fairly punishing army with that, just as they have such a massive unit selection. You might have the best army from one edition to another have almost no overlapping units. Perhaps one thing that I would generally make sure that you have at least some of though is to get some main damage dealers that can properly handle enemy heavies and tough stuff. With plenty of the starter style sets, you might get quite a lot of basic troops and things with bolters. They do have their role and can be quite good for objectives and things or skirmishing with lighter infantry, but it's maybe a bit too easy to collect an overabundance of those guys and really struggle against things that are very tough to take down. Some hard-hitting elites with damage to weapons or some big anti-tank guns would generally be quite helpful to have in the army roster. Currently though, and following points updates, I feel like Games Workshop has managed to balance quite a lot of the stronger choices for the Space Marine Codex quite well. All the units with Infiltrate are quite playable. Definitely nothing too wrong with going fairly heavy on iconic choices like Infiltrators, Eliminators or Scouts, though I feel like for more optimised lists you probably want a few units of those but not to go overboard. For some heavy hitting, things like the Ballistas Dreadnought or Redemptor Dreadnought, or the Gladiator Lancers, Repulsors or Lamb Raiders are all fairly good value. Most of the Space Marine elites are playable in their own way in certain detachments. Hellblasters are fairly general purpose and get you a lot of points on the board. Eradicators, Blade Guards, Terminators, Inceptors and Aggressors can all have their role, and pretty much most of the rest is fairly playable as well. Space Marine tournament lists can vary really quite a lot depending on the detachment, as it forces you towards quite different things, so that can be a factor too. Speaking of detachments, the Vanguard specific one is the Vanguard Spearhead. You don't necessarily have to use this one, but it is the one that feels the most on theme. Their special rule is very appropriately the Shadow Master's one, giving you a -1 to hit at greater than 12 inches and the benefit of cover for all your units at that distance as well. Really quite a nice general purpose one that benefits vehicles and infantry alike. Really quite a good durability boost at range. It won't be very meaningful if you're playing against an enemy army that relies on mainly melee though. It will be like not really having a detachment rule that much. In general, I think it incentivizes the Raven Guard to play keep away a bit with their enemy rather than just charging straight in. As well as with Raven Guard, it has often been quite strong with Ultramarines, particularly things like Uriel Ventris and granting Deep Strike to Centurions, allowing them to do some crafty redeploying. For their stratagems, there's some fun stuff here. There's a nice reactive move one with Calculated Feint. You get to move a full 6 inches automatically if you're a Phobos or a Scout unit. Guerrilla Tactics can allow you to return to Strategic Reserve. That could be really quite big for big shooting units, say for example Eradicators jumping around the board to strike again, or as mentioned Devastator Centurions can line up some scary lines of firepower with that. A Deadly Prize allows you to sabotage objectives, giving you the chance to get some mortal wounds on the enemy if they try and take them. Armour of Contempt is the standard Space Marine durability boost. Strike from the Shadows allows you to get a shooting damage buff if you're firing at greater than 12 inches away. +1 to hit and better AP can make a lot of units punch up quite well. And then probably one of my less favourite ones is Surgical Strikes for 2 CP that can give you precision in the fight phase. I feel like that's a tall order to get that keyword for a big 2 command points though. Otherwise for enhancements, by far my favourite is the Blade Driven Deep, 25 points for an infantry model to gain Infiltrate and confer that to their lead units. It means that you could have a potentially very dangerous unit right on the enemy front lines, maybe a big squad of Blade Guard veteran with character support, a big squad of Terminators, or some aggressors ready to move up, shoot and then charge. Basically the big value is getting a scary unit into a place where it shouldn't normally be able to get. Otherwise there's a few other fun ones, a Stealth and Lone Operative upgrade for a character, a Move Shoot Move rule for a Phobos character, and a Shadow War veteran one to help increase the cost of an enemy battle tactic stratagem and make it just a bit worse for them. Could be an okay points filler if you have 30 points left over. Overall I feel like it's really quite a fun on-themed attachment. People certainly have had some good success with it in tournaments in the past. Feels like you could get some very solid value out of a big scary unit that forward deploys, some sort of major shooting threat to use the redeployment stratagem, and then a whole bunch of Phobos and Scouts and other objective securing units to hoover up all the points and potentially make some very efficient use of the other stratagems. Finally, just putting that all together, here's just one rough idea for an army list. I believe the points might be a tiny bit over due to the balanced data slate points, though it's not crazy. This one trying to go a little bit of a halfway house between a strong Vanguard Spearhead list and also taking up plenty of units that the Raven Guard might like to field. Leading the army we of course have Kayvaan Shrike. He's leading a big unit of Assault Intercessors with the jump packs with a Power Fist. Should hopefully be a slightly nightmarish units jumping around the board picking off enemies while hopefully not getting hit back too hard. There's a big scary forward deploy unit with a Gravis Captain with the Infiltrate enhancement along with an Apothecary Biologist leading a big Aggressors unit. That one should just be a massively dangerous unit to hit the enemy first. There's a Phobos Librarian going with one of the squads of Infiltrators. That will give you a backfield holding units that can't be shot outside of 12 inches and also denies deep strike to 12 inches, plus another squad of Infiltrators for the midfield. Going heavy on the infiltrating forward deploy thing, there's 2 units of Scouts and 2 units with Eliminators with Las Fusils and the Bolt Carbine for some move shoot move, 3 Eradicators for some focused anti-tank, 5 Devastators with Grav Cannons, and then just for a little bit of vehicle heavy lifting, there's a Redemptor Dreadnought, a Gladiator Lancer and a Ballistas Dreadnought. Should hopefully just provide a little bit of raw strength against the enemy's heavy hitters. Finally, as if there weren't quite enough lone operative shenanigans here, there's also a Combi Weapon Lieutenant as well. He can mark one of the midfield objectives to make the enemies a bit easier to kill there, and it's quite hard to catch up with himself with his reactive moves and lone operative protection. Hopefully that should be enough to have an army list that has loads and loads of things to score objectives efficiently and use the sneaky tricks, and then a few units just to deal some raw damage between the jump intercessors, the Gravis units and the vehicles. Hopefully they can destroy enough of the enemy core army to give your infiltrating units the freedom to operate. In any case, I think I'll leave that there for this one. Let me know your thoughts on the Raven Guard down in the comments below. If you're a collector yourself, then let us know any tips or intrigue for the sneaky beaky Space Marines. Look forward to all your insights down in the comments. If you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to Allspecs Tactics. I'll certainly keep the regular 40k videos coming. I do tend to post new ones just about every day. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention that Allspecs Tactics does have a Patreon page as well, and you can find that linked in the video description if you'd like to help support and keep all these videos coming. Channel patrons do get a few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things happen next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.